One man who has painted a very bleak picture for the Tories is my fellow GBNews presenter Nigel Farage, because he wrote on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, the huge wins for Labour in the by-elections overnight confirms what I've said before. The Tories are headed for a deserved electoral disaster. And Nigel didn't exactly make life easier for Rishi Sunak earlier this week with a comment that might have just hinted about his future plans. He told the Politics Home website, "I'd be very surprised if I were not Conservative leader by 2026. Very surprised." Well, it must be said that Nigel said that he was serious about becoming the Tory leader, but later said that his comment was in jest. I'm not sure about that. Well, should Nigel Farage be the next leader of the Conservative Party? To debate this, I'm joined by political commentator Alex Armstrong and former Labour spokesman James Matthewson. Thank you both very, very much. Alex, I'll start with you. Nigel Farage, next Tory leader?
Oh, I'd love it. I'd love him to be the Tory leader. I think Greg Hunter's right when he's talking about the by-elections there. We've seen a massive dissatisfied Tory base. I mean, we're talking down numbers of like Tamworth down 21,000, missing 21,000 votes. Voters just aren't turning out for the Tories. We're seeing reform picking up some of those votes that would have kept the Tories in power, which says a little bit about what the traditional Conservative Party roots really, really want. Nigel's a true Conservative. That's what conservatism's about. We need to have someone who's going to deliver for Conservatives in this country, not this sort of corporate Rishi Sunak style David Cameron corporatism that we've all got very bored of.
James, I mean, you look absolutely stunned there at the idea of a Nigel Farage Conservative Party.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disguise that from you, Patrick. Hearing Alex say that Nigel Farage is a true Conservative and represents what conservatism is would have been a huge win for me a couple of years ago. To try and connect Nigel Farage and the Conservative Party so clearly together would have been so damaging for the Conservative Party. But it shows you just how far we've gone, how the depths to which we've plummeted as a country when you see that Nigel Farage is a true Conservative and that represents conservatism. I know Conservatives who would be absolutely gobsmacked by that claim. However, for me, to be honest with you, I couldn't think of a better thing to happen to the Tory party, because electorally it would be an absolute disaster for them, as we've learned in the Labour Party ourselves. Winning is not done.
Can I ask about that, James? Can I ask about that? I think the thing is, and this is the reason why I ask it, I mean, would it be that much of a disaster electorally? Because a lot of people went to reform. So as opposed to people going out in their droves and voting en masse for the Labour Party over the Conservatives, a lot of people, I would argue, James, went and decided that they wanted to be more Conservative, James.
Yeah, but the problem is that you don't win general elections by being on those polls, on being on either extreme. You win them by building coalitions. You're not going to build a coalition with Nigel Farage. Allow me to be generous for a moment, because it's not my nature to try and give the Tory party advice that's useful. It's actually the opposite of what I would like to do, really. But it is absolutely not the way to win an election, to go to either extreme, as the Labour Party has learned in our recent history as well.
Alice, can I just say, is that true, actually? Because, I mean, Britain is not a socialist country, but it's potentially about to vote for a chap who I think is quite socialist, ironically because our Conservative leader is not Conservative enough, which is weird, but I think true.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, Patrick. I mean, Labour haven't actually increased their vote by very much at all in this by-election, where they should be sweeping, actually collecting Tory votes. They're not collecting any, which says actually tell you a little bit more about the state of politics today than it does about the Labour Party. I don't think they really are getting this message they seem to be hammering home, supposedly. There doesn't seem to be much of that going on. This is the problem, right? The Tories have been in power for a decade. They haven't found where their values lie. They aren't putting out conservative policies. The online safety bill is a prime example of that. It's completely unconservative. There's nothing libertarian about it whatsoever. It's actually taking freedom away from people. We've got the highest tax of any government since World War II. These are not conservative values. How can any Conservative vote for them? And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about real traditional Conservative values. And yet, James may be a bit surprised to hear that, but actually Nigel Farage is coming out with Conservative policy. In fact, the best policies that the Tories, the vote winners, have been the ones that Nigel Farage has been putting forward. Brexit was Nigel's baby, and that brought the Conservative Party together under Boris. So, I think maybe you feel like Nigel Farage is this big extreme, but, if you actually listen to what he says, it's hardly extreme at all.
I've got some footage of Nigel Farage at Conservative Party conference, by the way, which is him being mobbed by you know, a wide range of people. There are lots of them quite young, you know. And James, you know, Nigel Farage there at Conservative Party conference walks in a little bit like a kind of political rock star. When Keir Starmer walks into a room, the lights go out, don't they?
I think we need to be careful about what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody who's going to lead the country. We're talking about politicians who are elected to do a very important job. We're not talking about rock stars. We've seen what rock stars do in power. We've seen what these big personalities do. It's been disastrous.
Well, they win elections, which is what we're talking about, Joe. This is the thing. You know, we've gone from a situation where we had an incredibly well-elected Prime Minister who then did some quite silly things and was, you know, nudged out by people who thought that it was disastrous. He would be a disaster for them electorally. Then they had a Prime Minister who was actually voted for by Conservative Party members, which I agree, by the way, is not democratic enough to run a nation, but that was the best metric we had. Then she went, and now we've got somebody who's not been voted for by anybody in charge. And you've got Keir Starmer there, who, you know, isn't exactly Mr. Personality, is he? I mean, the big losers in all of this are the people, aren't they, James?
But the key thing for me lies there, Patrick, where you've just said that Boris Johnson was somebody who was elected with a huge mandate and then did some very silly things. For many of us, the fact that Boris Johnson was going to do some very silly things was in the reading for years. And it's the same with Nigel Farage. If you look at his former teachers have come out and said that the man's racist, he's fascist. They're big claims. They're claims that, you know, I don't want to say they're people who know
one thing I will say, all right, I'm going to say about that, which is no doubt Nigel, well, obviously Nigel does deny all of those things, but also, James, I mean, those are school reports, right, from teachers years ago. I mean, is that the best we've got? Because really, it would appear, James, that those in glass houses maybe shouldn't throw stones because, you know, Keir Starmer tried to get Jeremy Corbyn elected twice. He's friends with Hamas, isn't he? And look what's going on now. I mean, it's remarkable, especially considering that Keir Starmer's wife is Jewish. I don't know how he could look at himself in the mirror and do that, James. But you want that guy to get elected, don't you?
The reality is, I think when you look at people like Nigel Farage, and for me, like I say, the claims from people that are there previously, we had warnings about Boris Johnson from former employers, we had warnings from people who'd known him his whole life that he wasn't suitable for power. It's about whether you are fit to be in government and whether you're fit to lead it. Now, I think most Conservatives in the Conservative Party today would actually disagree with Alex and would say that they don't think Nigel Farage is suitable, regardless of what those fringes think.
Right, well,
and that tells you that.
All right, Alex, I'll put that to you. So do you think that Keir Starmer is he's got the kind of moral standing that we need in a way that someone like Nigel Farage just doesn't have?
No, I mean, I don't think most people know what Keir Starmer's values or his morals even are, frankly. I mean, he's just more of the same, isn't he? This is why he's not an inspiring leader. It's why he's not seeing massive increases in his vote share, in the votes that he's getting in his by-elections. He should be wiping the floor with the Tory base right now, and unfortunately, he's not. And in fact, I saw the great graphic that the BBC put up while he was giving his presentation at the Labour Party conference. And that, quite frankly, I think the biggest word was "don't know" behind him, which says a lot about Keir Starmer, frankly. Nigel Farage inspires young people. He inspires people from across the country. And he actually does speak on behalf of the working class. The biggest problem Labour has is that they've forgotten who the working class are. They preach to these virtue signalling organisations and people like Jeremy Corbyn, who are massively extremely on the left, BLM, they've got Keir Starmer taking a knee. You've got him out there going... We encourage Just Stop Oil. These things are massively out of touch with the working class. So the Labour Party is just more of the same of the Tories right now. And I think you were speaking to an MP earlier on, Patrick, who nailed it. He said, that we actually need to put up some Conservative Party policies. Well, what have they been doing? They are the Conservative Party. Nigel is being the staple for the Tories for the last few years on their own policies.
James, is it a little bit bleak? We saw some pictures of mid-Bedfordshire there, and you've got Keir Starmer standing next to kind of quite a dorky-looking eco-loon, some would say. Is that really the way that the Labour Party wants to connect with working-class voters? Is it just maybe depressing for you that Nigel connects more with working-class voters?
Well, let me tell you, as a working-class voter myself from the northeast of England, that's categorically untrue. And as somebody who's most of my family voted to leave, lots of my friends voted to leave, and then I've always from day one said to them, that their voices should be listened to and respected, and the reasons as to why they did so should be respected, that I find categorically fascinating that Nigel Farage seems to be painted as somebody who was the champion of that when they themselves, many of the people I know who voted Leave, look at Farage as a caricature of that movement and a joke, and that actually, you know, the more sensible elements of those Leave voting movements don't want to associate themselves with Nigel Farage because he's not in touch with true working class values.
Okay.
He thinks he knows what they are, and he's not.
That's interesting because one of the reasons why, you know, we have straps like that below there, Farage for PM, and we talk about Rishi Sunak struggling at the minute and whether or not Keir Starmer's going to struggle, whether or not Keir Starmer would really win the next general election, or whether it would just be that there's general apathy towards Conservatives. There is a sense that Nigel Farage would do better in the red wall, Alex. Do you buy that? Because obviously James thinks that's complete rubbish.
Yeah, well, I tend not to base other people's opinions on my own. But you know, Keir Starmer couldn't even define what working class was on TV the other day. I was on LBC, I think he was. He couldn't even define what working class was.
Rishi Sunak's never had a working class friend either, though, has he? To be fair,
well, that's very true, and I don't think Rishi Sunak pretends to know what working class means. Yeah. But you know, Nigel Farage clearly does. And, you know, he is one of the most popular unelected politicians in this country by far. I think he's in the top 4, actually. And, you know, he's the only person you see out in the pub, you know, out there talking to people on the street. And he seems to be very, very popular with the working class people. So, you know, I wouldn't suggest that my own opinions are representative of the working class. But I certainly think from speaking to my friends and family who are very much working class, he's extremely popular because he says it as it is. They've had enough.
Go on, James. Final word to you. Final word to you, James. Go on.
Complete nonsense and ignorance to say that a man walks into a pub and he represents the working class. It's offensive to working class communities in the Northeast. It's offensive to everybody. That's not what I said. In the vote leave, at the end of the day, Nigel Farage inspires one thing in this country, and it's division.
Oh, chaps. Well, I tell you what, it's a good debate. Thank you very much, both of you. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. As political commentator, Alex Armstrong, a former Labour spokesman, James Matthewson as well. Great stuff. Thank you very much.